Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity, the podcast where we deep dive into real and raw stories of impact. I'm your host, Ashley McGrath, and in each episode, I'm aiming to inspire you, our listeners, into action by bringing you authentic conversations, success stories, and practical advice. Join us as we amplify the voices of individuals from all walks of life, activists, scholars, CEOs, and everyday champions, sharing their journeys, insights, and strategies for driving meaningful change. From everyday conversations to global movements, we'll explore the complexities of gender equity with empathy, curiosity, and a commitment to action. So, whether you're a seasoned advocate or just beginning to explore this crucial topic, Voices of Gender Equity is your space to listen, learn, and engage. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome to Voices of Gender Equity, real and raw stories of impact. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Dave Fyfe, CEO of Synergy, the state's largest electricity generator and retailer of gas and electricity. So, Dave, we know your name and we know the company that you work for, but I would love the listeners to get to know you a little wee bit more on a personal level. So, can you tell us a little bit more about who is Dave Fyfe?
All right, okay. Well, been here 32 years, originally from Scotland. So came out here in 1991, kicked around ball for a year. I went back home, got my immigration, been here ever since. So still got the thick Scottish accent. I think you need to leave when you're about 8 years old to lose it. So I'm married. I've got one boy, Liam, who's 25. He's engaged now, doing well in life. And Joanne, my wife, has got two daughters, Kaya, who's 19, and Eve, who's 16. Um, Passions, I guess, are the gym. Love going to the gym, cars, watches, anything mechanical I enjoy. And I've been in the energy sector now for sort of nearly 2 decades. So
Awesome.
electricity is kind of in my blood a little bit now.
Sounds like it. Great. Thank you. So Dave, this podcast is all about sharing real and raw stories of impact. So we're very grateful to have your support as a very valued member of CEOs for Gender Equity. And really, I want to kind of capture some of your insights and experiences and stories around gender equity to, try and inspire and
Okay.
influence our listeners here. So I'd like to just kick off by asking you to share, was there a defining moment or experience that happened in your career which ignited your passion for gender equity?
I'm not sure there was a defining moment. I think for me, I've always had a view that as a leader, I've got 1,100 odd employees, and if I can have 1,100 people coming to work doing something that they really enjoy and are passionate about and being rewarded and recognised appropriately and go home happy, that I'll have a very, very successful business. And I think going back in time, as many people know, I got caught up in the Bali bombings in 2002 and came very close to losing my life. I've got an artificial leg. I had 60% burns. It was a real pivotal moment in my life where I realised that every day is for living, and that for me, creating a work environment where everybody can come into the office or the work site, do something they're really passionate about and enjoy, and just feel fulfilled at the end of every day and every week. Just is probably where I sort of lean to. And I think going back in time, when I early on in my leadership career, particularly when I was at Telstra, we had sort of people coming back from maternity leave and watching how difficult that was, particularly if somebody was a single parent as well. And we had one time at Telstra in a very senior sales role, we made the decision to do job sharing on a sales role with very high end customers, large corporate customers, and they ended up welcoming that. And so we had two people who are coming back from maternity leave share a sales role, share sales targets and performance. There's a lot of trust involved in doing that.
That's awesome.
And 3 days, 2 days, and then 2 days, 3 days, and seeing that being very successful. So I always felt that we could get things much better. And at Telstra, I worked for quite a few, phenomenal female leaders who have, made an imprint in who I am today as well. So it's just been an ongoing thing. I'm no expert. I try, it's same with people with disabilities. Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders. Really getting that really healthy mix in our business is just vital for us as a business that's going through a lot of change.
Good. And whenever you came into obviously the role at Synergy a couple of years ago now, I know that you've already made some quite, bold decisions, and you've kind of driven quite bold change already in terms of the representation of different genders around you. And I'd love you to maybe share a little bit more about that, first of all.
Yeah, look, and I'm not sure. I don't even think they're bold. I just think it's good business for me. So we have increased our representation at the executive table, and that's a little bit not by design as such, but design is getting a good outcome for the business and bringing in new talent with varied background and varied skills, and that's proven to be been brilliant for us. We're an organisation that's going through so much change. Our energy sector's going through so much change, so having real diversity of thought is really important. We made a decision, with one of our executives. I'm a great believer, the higher up in your leadership journey that you go, the less subject matter expertise that you actually need. I run a electricity generation and retail business, but I couldn't wire a plug, to be honest. I've got people around me who do that. So
Love it.
as you go through your leadership career, my view is it's all about people being able to make strategic decisions, thinking laterally, problem solving. It's not about technical expertise. And we had our executive who looked after HR, people, safety, environment. When we did the restructure, we moved her across into running our generation portfolio. So she now currently runs all of our generation fleet, coal-fired power stations, gas-fired power stations, and has just made a huge impact and doing a wonderful job in doing that, and just brings a very, very different way of thinking and ask different questions. For me, it's all about asking the questions, particularly as an executive, so you can identify where risk is. And that's for me, that was a big demonstration. It wasn't a gender-based decision, though. I did it on the basis that I knew she could do the job amazingly well, and it does send a message to the business that, hey, you don't need to be an electrical engineer or have a really good technical background to come up. We'd announced the closure of our coal-fired power stations down in Collie by end of 29. And my view is that the leadership role as an executive in that part of the business was as much about people as it was about running power stations. And obviously running power stations is the core component of it, but it was all about the people. And she's an exceptional people leader, and that's worked out really well for us.
I love this example, and I share this example with, plenty of people as I go about my business trying to inspire and influence CEOs to take action, because it just goes to show, like, that was a bit of some might see that as a bit of like a left of field thing, but you're exactly right. It's all about like the capability of the person, and just seeing someone's, potential, even though it's not a square, a square peg in a round hole. It's about the potential of that person.
No.
Did you approach that person about the opportunity, and if so, what was her initial reaction?
Yeah, I did. So when we were going through that sort of structural change, I was engaging as best I could with all the executives. And yeah, we sat down. I floated it. Wasn't expected, I don't think. I think she would say that. And she went away and thought about it and spoke to somebody who was her coach, external to the business, and they said the same thing, that absolutely go for it.
Wow.
And yeah, and you sometimes, again, I don't even think it's a square peg in a round hole. I think it's a round peg in a round hole with maybe some slightly sharp edges that make it a little bit different. But
Yeah.
for me, again, it was all about leadership as executives. It's all about the people for
Mm.
me, and that's where that person, she excels in that, and it's worked out great. It's been a couple of years now,
Mm.
and that part of the business is performing excellently.
And there's proof, right? And you're kind of playing it down a wee bit, but it's like, you know, if every CEO had that approach, and when these opportunities come up, it's a considered thought, not to, it's easy to go, oh, well, maybe the two I see, or maybe we'll pinch someone in that role from it. Like, that's the easy and obvious option. But to have that, that mindset of going out of you going away a little bit from traditional thinking, and actually what you've done to that employee is you've sponsored her for that role. So you have, it's a thought bubble that you've approached her, and you've now lit that fire in her belly, and it's making you look good, which is great because she's smashing it. So I just,
Yeah, well, the business is going well, and
yeah.
we've got to try and develop everybody,
Mm,
and you become much more rounded as a person, as a leader, when you do experience different work environments and have different types of people underneath you and different types of industry underneath you. You
mm,
do grow and develop when that happens
mm,
to you. It's no different for me. I mean, if I go back in time, Paul Italiano, CEO at Western Power at the time, I had never done operations before, and I recognised an opportunity for me. I spoke to Paul about it, and he chucked me into operations at Western Power. Again, I couldn't wire a plug, and I was chief operations officer at Western Power for 7 years. But for me, it's no different to Paul taking a chance on me.
mm.
It's just,
You're right.
if you
Yep.
take the gender part out of it, he took a chance on me. I'd a very strong sales background coming into Western Power, even though I was an engineer from a long time ago. And he saw something in me from, I don't know what, but, and it worked out
Yep.
well for me. I think it worked out okay for the business. But that's no different. Somebody took a chance on me and believed in me and gave me that push and supported me through that. And that's me just doing the same thing.
Love it. And can I ask, how was it received in the business?
Never heard any negative.
Good.
Never heard anything other than just positive. And um, her leadership team under her, who have been in, some of them grew up in the business, came through as an apprentice down at Collie, for example, couldn't speak highly enough of her.
Great.
Yeah, it's never been a conversation, to be honest.
And isn't that like
And that's how it
that's
should
the
be.
ideal, isn't it?
Yeah,
Where it's just organic and that just flows. So that's
yeah. I
amazing to
mean,
hear.
and that's she took the role by the horns, just got out and amongst the business down to Collie, become part of the team in a very short space of time. And that's what I knew she would do.
Mm,
So it just wasn't an issue for us,
so
and the
good.
business, it's been great.
So
Yeah,
good.
we don't even talk about it.
No, so and that is the ultimate, where yeah, it's organic and it flows. I'm trying to do myself out of a job. I'm trying to make it so that there doesn't need to be a CEOs for gender equity, because it just happens.
Yeah, no,
You
success
know?
is us not sitting here having this
That's
conversation,
right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
But for now, here we
but here
are.
we are.
So let's make the most of it. So look, you mentioned you've obviously got about 1,100 employees at
Yeah,
Synergy. So like that's a lot. So I'm keen to know, in the sense of, in Synergy and even more broadly, how do you define gender equity, and why do you think it's important? So, what kind of things are you looking at in Synergy, and maybe in your personal life as well?
yeah. I think for me, it comes back to that thing around inclusion, and as I said, people turning up, being themselves, and going home, irrespective of the background, the language barriers. I still have a bit of a language, but you probably find it
Me
sometimes when
too.
people
Yeah.
look at you blankly, particularly after a few drinks. But like people, that's ultimately my desire. And as I said, people come to work doing a good job, recognised appropriately, and going home happy, and their family lives sort of, it's a better environment for everybody if we can achieve that. So, we represent the community of Western Australia. It's ultimately the community of Western Australia who funds Synergy, and pay for all of us to be there, and we have to represent that community. So there's that aspect of it, but the other aspect of it is just business performance. It's just, for me, and we keep hearing this, you keep reading it, all the data shows it, and it becomes a bit of a cliche just even talking about it. But
Hmm.
that's the reality. If I'm surrounded, particularly the executive table, with people the same as myself, it'd be a disaster. Because I'm 100 miles an hour and a bit of a risk taker. I need people around me who slow me down a little bit and give me that sort of diverse insight into things, and even problem solving and dealing with issues. And I always go back to people issues as well. Different perspectives are really important. And so, we're on a long pathway, and operations is a longer change. We do a lot of work with in at schools. We do the solar challenge, and where we're taking sort of electricity into schools and trying to get that STEM, science, technology, engineer, maths, trying to get a different set of cohort coming through that are interested in that. And the energy sector now, I just think, is an amazing place to be with decarbonisation and the rapid change of technology, and younger kids are really interested in it. So if we can get the full pull through apprenticeships, younger females getting in through different pathways in schools, university degrees like engineering, but you have to start at it's almost, for me, I almost sometimes feel like it's a generational change to get the
100%.
operational part of our business and, other businesses. I worked at Western Power before, to get that change coming through, but we can get there, but you got to be a bit more deliberate about it, and sometimes you do have to make some deeper decisions, and maybe not the happiest decision for everybody to make that happen, particularly when you're pulling through, things like people like apprentices, actually making sure that you're getting a cohort of females coming through.
I wanted to ask you about that because that's another thing that you've shared with me, in our work at CEOs for Gender Equity, is that am I right in saying that you actually kind of mandated that you wanted to see
Yeah, we
gender
did.
balance on those
Yeah,
shortlists? So
yeah,
how did that
we
go?
did, and that was in a previous organisation, and that was fully supported by the CEO at the time. And I think we had 16 apprentices coming in, and we said it was going to be eight male, 8 female, and we need to be careful when as we talk about gender as well, but just take that for that. And when we went through the original recruitment process, we came out with 12 males, 4 females. I was like, so what and that. In the past, we'd probably just moved ahead with that, but we took a pause and we said, no, that's not a great outcome for us. So we proceeded with the 8 males, eight of the 12 males, and 4 females. And 3 months later, completely sat down, and the recruitment team sat down and worked out, how do we do all of this differently? We're obviously not attracting the talent. We had something like 1,200 applicants, and I think like 20 females.
Wow.
And so we were missing out on the talent, and we weren't tapping into it. So, in fairness to the recruitment team, they changed how they recruited. They went into, working groups in the community, Facebook groups, talking to other female apprentices, all people who had already been qualified, looking at referrals. And we ended up with a different cohort. And we actually went out to the business and said, look, we are going out for 4 more apprentices, and we are overtly going out for 4 more females. And I remember I got an email from somebody, and fair play to them, they did take the time to drop me a note saying, don't necessarily agree with this, Dave. And I said, come up for a chat.
Mm-hmm.
And his concern was that we were lowering the benchmark, or the hurdle. And I said, no. And I explained to him, 1,200 applicants, 20 females, we actually just have to change how we recruit.
Yep.
And they're still going to go through the same process and still meet the same benchmarks. And he was like, oh, cool. And that was it. And we got, we ended up with 8 and 8. But if we hadn't done anything, we would end up with 3/4 male and 1/4 female. But sometimes those are you do have to insert yourself a little bit as a senior leader, as an executive, or as a CEO, and just say, no, look, we'll have to make some decisions here.
Love that.
Otherwise you always end up with the same outcome, right?
Well, that's the whole thing, isn't it? And that's what kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's about being deliberate. So yeah, it would have been easy just to go right, crack on with that shortlist as it is. Oh, well, think about it next time. But you actually paused and said, right, and took some deliberate action. And even with that little bit of kind of resistance that you got, again, you could have just brushed that off, but you made the time to kind of engage that person and hear where he was coming from, and then kind of give your perspective. And so instead of that kind of, because I hear that there is, a bit of backlash, resistance going on out there with this big push for gender equity. But by doing that, you've kind of, he could have been a bit of a resistor and spreading that, but just by taking the time, now he's engaged, now he gets it.
Yeah, and it's that, I think in business as well, we're starting to lose the ability to have a conversation. We hide behind large meetings, emails, text messages. I can't remember, the last time somebody's actually picked up the phone and called me. It's usually a text now, right? So
Mm,
I do think we're losing that human connection in business a little, and it's something I'm really
mm,
passionate about, just getting going. For
good.
me, that was a 25 half-hour conversation. It was really, part of my day, but it means that after having that conversation, that person's going back, and anyone that raises it with him will go, no, he'll then say, no, I'm sorry, that's not the case.
Exactly.
So yeah, I just feel the power of conversation and talking about things is really important.
Hence why we're here today.
Yeah, true.
And trying to capture all these nuggets of these absolute gems. Um, so look, you shared some amazing things so far, but I know that it hasn't always been a smooth journey. So I want to kind of pivot a little bit now and ask you to share a moment when you faced adversity on this journey towards gender equity, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, look, I think it's an ongoing thing, right? I mean, that was one example I gave you where I had a bit of pushback in the business. I think, even now, one of the things I'm sort of challenged with at the executive level is, are people just, you develop people through, get them onto the executive team, and they get poached and go and end up going somewhere else. I think one of the things we're grappling with at the moment is that, those really high performing female executives, I can't keep them either.
Mm,
I lost one person to another role who went on to as a deputy CEO at another organisation. Great opportunity, and Mel wouldn't mind me talking about that. We'd sort of stretched Mel's role a little bit in the previous 2 years to take her out of her comfort zone, give her a wider portfolio, and hey, it worked. She's
too well.
yeah, too well, and she moved on, and that's great. And I think that's a wonderful outcome for the business community and for Mel. But then I'm back to, all right, I'm back into the recruitment again, which can be quite exhausting sometimes. So I think recruitment of talent is a challenge for us. At Synergy, sometimes we're not able to pay what the private sector pays, but we do have a really good employee value proposition where we're building a whole heap of renewable assets and decarbonising the West Australian economy, and our projects are all running on time, on budget, and doing a fantastic job. So I think a value proposition is really there, but holding on to talent is really difficult. And even as we're bringing through talent through the business, as we identify the people, and it's not just females, I'm talking males as well, and
Mhm.
we bring them through the business because we're doing a lot of work in the decarbonisation area. A lot of our projects on wind farms and big battery storage projects and the likes, that everybody else is now trying to do that. So we're a bit of an easy target. So
Mm,
we're continuing to work our way through that. And I think I've recognised the last few times I've went out for recruitment, I think pulling talent through the business is an area that we've got to work better at. And we're investing quite heavily in leadership programs, particularly focused on female leadership, different types of mentoring programs, working with external parties to do that, so that where we can, where we've got people in our business who are really passionate about becoming a leader, particularly female, that we actually help them through and give them a bit of a pull through,
great.
and a bit of a push through,
Yep.
because sometimes people don't want to put up their hand, but if we can give them the confidence to do it through some of the programs that we've now got in place, and we're doing a lot of work in this area, that we're starting to see people coming through, and talent that those hidden, I always say, those hidden faces behind keyboards that do amazing jobs but are not great necessarily putting their hand up and
That's
promoting
right.
themselves. So that's a big focus for us at the moment, and we're starting to see that talent coming through our business.
Great. And it's kind of the example that maybe you talked a little bit earlier about, you sponsoring that, executive to do that hands-on job. And, there's a lot of, the bottom line is that different genders are, as a generalization, wired differently. Right. So, women as a generalization don't tend to put our hands up for things. Same for this role, leading CEOs for gender equity. I didn't put my hand up for it. I was sponsored for it. So I love that, I think we need to talk more about that and not shy away from that.
Yeah.
Like, it's how we're wired. And I don't necessarily think that, that women need to change how they are, but it's about acknowledging that's how we think and putting these interventions in, which, yeah, like lift us up.
Yeah, and,
So,
and, and we take the opportunity when, through acting roles, for example, when our last sort of 3 executive appointments have actually come through the business. And I think that's a wonderful result for the business. But it's when you have those acting opportunities for people that we try and actually look across the business a bit wider, and it's something we're not great at yet, and taking somebody from one business unit and chucking them into an acting role somewhere else and supporting them through that. But sometimes you never know until you give it a go. So you got to identify the people, know that, and recognize good talent. Then you've got to give them an opportunity, and then you've got to kind of sometimes push them into it. And the worst that can happen is that you go back to your previous role, but you've had a great experience. The best that can happen is that actually you think, this is brilliant. I'm going to give this a crack. I've now got a taste for this. I want a permanent sort of senior leadership role, and I'm going to keep going through that journey. But we got to put the support around people, and we don't always get that right. We're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect at doing this either. I have my moments where I sort of reflect on things and think, could have done better there. But that's just part of being a human as well. We don't always get it right, but just got to give it a go and take a bit of a chance, take a bit of a risk on people. And
love
and
that.
generally people, if you've identified the talent and you throw them into a role, generally people shine, you know.
Good on you. I just love hearing these stories. And I think reflecting on our conversation, like a lot of the change you're driving is it's really like, your core and like your leadership style. So I want to kind of ask you, you know, specifically thinking about gender equity or more broadly in leadership, are there any, role models or mentors that you kind of looked up to, which are helping to shape how you operate?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of people that have come up, that have been in my life as I've went through my career. As I said at Telstra, I had a lot of really strong female leaders who helped shape who I am. David Thorey, who was managing director at Telstra at the time, just built an exceptionally good executive team, and kind of showed how it could be done. Um, but I come across this every day at work, where you see people who are given an opportunity and just do an amazing job, and they're as much a role model for me than some previous leader that I had. So I think for me it's every day I see it. I see talent performing extraordinarily well. I see people stepping up into roles that they never imagined they were doing. And just grasping it, and for me, it's every stage of my career. I've learned from people all the way through. I've learned from leaders who are more. I've had leaders who are very much about getting stuff done and just taking action, and I've had leaders who are very people oriented and letting others take action. And I think for me, there's points in time where I've just got to take action. I've got to say that, yeah, I know targets. There's various conversations about whether targets work or don't work, particularly around gender equity. But for me, what doesn't get measured, what gets measured gets done generally. What doesn't get measured just gets forgotten about. And I'm comfortable to have targets. It doesn't mean that we make poor business decisions based on a target, but it's front and center and it's part of the conversation. I've learned that from previous leaders as well, that having guiding lights, so to speak, is really important. So yeah, I've had many people in my career. Fortunately, I've been very lucky that I've done many different sort of things. And yeah,
It's
take
all
me
worked out well.
take me where. Well, some days I go home and think maybe it's not so good, but but you have.
Cry into your glass of iron brew.
Yeah, Pepsi Max it is for me.
That's right.
But I'm the same as everybody else. I'm still learning as well. Continually learning, continuing to get things wrong, and I think as long as you hold your hand up and say you made a mistake and you rectify it, and I continually do that. If I get something wrong in a meeting, or I speak to somebody a bit short or sharpish, I'll think about it that night and go back the next day and apologise.
Good on
But we're
you.
still learning. Everybody's learning, right?
100%. So look, I want to move on now just to maybe some like really just practical advice for our listeners. So what would what advice would you have for listeners who may feel like a wee bit overwhelmed about this topic of gender equity, or a bit uncertain as to how they can contribute on a day-to-day basis? What are some kind of key takeaways or actions you would say for them?
Yeah, look, I think in life it's quite easy to get overwhelmed. I mean, we always have this situation where you got a lot going on in your personal life, your work life, and sometimes life gets overwhelming. And I'm a great believer in just like taking one step at a time. You know, it's like that thing when you can't see the wood from the trees, or you're in the forest, you can't see, but you can certainly see the step in front of you. And I remember when I was recovering in hospital after Bali, I used to just set myself little individual sort of goals. And when I sort of achieved that, and the first one was just actually rolling over on the bed because I lost when I left hospital, I was like 46 kilos or 47 kilos or something. And so setting those small incremental goals and giving yourself a pat at the back is something that I've just really lived by ever since that day. And it's the same with this, like it's easy just to get overwhelmed with, there's so much to do. Same as anyone that goes into a new role. You got to manage your own expectations, but just do one thing and then do it well, and then do the next thing and do it well,
Love it.
and just keep doing it. I'm a great believer in, lots of small things make a big difference, right? And that was that Malcolm Gladwell book. It's quite an interesting book, Tipping Point. But, I think that's it. Just get stuff done. Stop. Don't just keep talking about it. Get small things done to start with and measure it. And once you do that, you just get on to the next thing.
Love
It's
it.
got to be outcome focused. It's like when we talk about cultural change, for me, this is where the engineering brain kicks in. I always get it back down to a program of work. What are the things that we're going to do and how we're going to measure them and how do we know they're successful? And that's the only advice I can give is just get on with it. Do things.
Love it.
And it might not always be the right thing. You might get to the end of something and think, that's not had the impact. But it probably has had an impact, and it's probably got a lot of people thinking differently. But just get on with doing stuff.
Love it.
Get stuff done.
So even like your next hire or your next promotion, just building a bit of a gender equity lens into that. Just something simple.
Yeah, there's lots, and look, we're all part of this community as well. We're all learning from each other, and having, how do you word your adverts? How do you pull talent through the business that won't put their hand up? Do you make sure that you've got 50-50 on every job? I mean, one of the challenges we had when we sort of started introducing that into Synergy was that, okay, well, there's operational jobs that I was told you can't get 50-50, and I said that's okay occasionally, but you got to, first of all, having it there as a target means you're going to think about things differently. You're going to recruit a little bit differently, and if you don't end up there, you're still gathering data. So if there's certain types of occupations or roles that you're just not getting that talent coming through to interview stage, then at least you can identify them and do something about that. And that could be going all the way back to, doing the school stuff. It could be your recruitment practices that have to change. But unless you make it a sort of mandatory target, well, mandatory is a strong word, but unless you give people that here's where we want you to get to, and then we measure when we don't get there, then it tells you stuff. And it was the same in previous roles. It tells you what type of roles that you're having trouble being able to get to 50-50 representation at interview stage. And then you go, all right, for those particular roles, what do we need to do differently? And that drives, a different type of behaviour. And then, having equal representation on interview panels. What you don't want, for us is, certainly as I'm recruiting executives or, senior leaders underneath as a female, for say yourself, Ashley, if you turn up to four of me sitting on the opposite side of the table, you're immediately going to have an impression of what that means.
That's right.
And that's, I might have missed that along the way. So having it a bit more front and center is important. And as an executive team, we talk about all of this sort of stuff. So we know that even the pictures that we use in annual reports, etc., we got to represent who all our people are, not just the few.
That's right. And these are simple things, right? But like you said, it's step by step. So the next time, like, you're publishing your annual report, can you have a look through and see what
Yeah.
the mix is there? Or the next time you're pulling together an interview panel, do you have at least
Yeah.
representation of the different
And it's
genders?
not falsely representing who
No.
we are as a business. It's actually more accurately representing who we are. It's just for some reason all the way through, some unconscious bias kicks in, and but it's not a deliberate thing, and it doesn't represent our business when we see things like that we have to change. It's actually, that doesn't look like us, so let's change it.
Awesome. Well, I think you've given us some really, really real and raw insights into who you are and the change that you're driving and things that are happening at Synergy towards gender equity. I think you've given us some definitely some bite-sized takeaways that everyone who's listening and following today can, and that's just what it's about, right? It's about spreading these little nuggets of information. If we can have that ripple effect, then it all adds up to drive and change, which is what we're all about. So,
Like I said, I'm certainly not perfect in any way, shape, or form. Our business isn't, but we're trying, and we'll continue to learn from others as well. And that's, as I said, what's brilliant about being part of this community is listening to the experiences of others and learning, and then we'll all get better.
we sure will. And I'm sure many of people will get better from listening to your insights today. So thank you so much
Thanks
for
for having
joining
me.
us on Voices of Gender Equity. And I'm sure we'll have you back again in the future.
All right. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes another episode of Voices of Gender Equity, real and raw stories of impact.